Carrig is a young shapeshifter who lives with his family in the mountains. Although he is capable of taking on human form, the boy lives as a cougar and is forbidden from interacting with humans. However, over time, his desire to get to know humans more closely grew, so the boy decided to leave his family of origin and was adopted by a human family. One day, while having breakfast with his adoptive parents and siblings, Carrig sees a news story in the newspaper about animal attacks and discovers that several accidents involving different species have been happening lately. That morning, after saying goodbye to Marlon and Donald, the boy gets in the car with his adoptive mother, and Melody insists on accompanying them on the trip to Carrig's new school. Throughout the journey, the boy realizes that he is being followed by two crows and wonders if they are also shapeshifters. At dusk, the family decides to stop at a hotel to rest after a long trip, and the crows remain on their tail. During the night, Carrig hears a noise coming from outside and walks to the window in an attempt to understand what is happening. At that moment, he sees a pack of wolves running toward an alley, and suddenly the lights in the neighboring building go out. In the morning, the family returns to the road and, a few hours later, finally arrives at Clearwater High. Upon getting out of the car, Carrig's suspicions are confirmed, and he discovers that the crows that were following his vehicle are students from that school. At that moment, Lisa Clearwater, the school principal, appears to greet him and, after welcoming him, asks how the boy was found by Anna Ralston. According to the woman, Carrig's biological parents were never found. A few years ago, while working as a social worker, Anna received a call to rescue the boy. However, seeing him frightened and suspicious of everyone around him, she decided to adopt him and convinced her husband to welcome Carrig into their home. When the boy was about to start high school, Anna received an invitation to enroll him at Clearwater High and thought it would be a good opportunity for him to make new friends, as he had always felt very lonely and out of place in the city where he lived. After answering all of Anna's questions, Lisa asks to speak with Carrig alone and soon reveals that she knows the secret the boy has been hiding for so many years. According to the principal, at that school, all members are shapeshifters, so the young man no longer needs to hide his transformations. Suddenly, the school alarm starts ringing and the principal leaves to check what is happening. At that moment, she discovers that Anna and Melody are walking around the campus and asks her assistant to help her take them away, as that area is restricted. Seeing all those animals of different species gathered together, Carrig is filled with joy, as he has never seen so many shapeshifters in one place before. While walking through the school hallways, Carrig meets Jeffrey and his pack. Immediately, the two young men establish an enmity, but James manages to arrive in time to stop the fight. After being introduced to the entire school, Anna says goodbye to her son, and as she and Melody walk back to the vehicle, Andrew Milling, the millionaire who finances the institution, arrives on campus. After saying goodbye to his family, Carrig is introduced to Andrew and reveals that he abandoned his life in the mountains to live with humans because he felt that something was missing that could not be fulfilled if he chose to live as a cougar forever. As soon as he arrives in his room, Carrig is introduced to the school rules, and as soon as the principal leaves, a squirrel appears at the window. At that moment, the boy opens the window and the rodent invades the space to introduce itself. According to Holly, she has been assigned to be his guide and takes him to his first shape-shifting class. Before beginning the transformations, Mr. Elwood reminds the young people that they are only allowed to use their powers during class and states that they must be very careful not to be seen by humans during the transformation process. As he has just arrived at school, Carrig is chosen to demonstrate his powers, but before he can reveal his animal form, Brandon transforms. The bison boy finds it very difficult to control his powers and, as a result, is unable to remain in his human form for very long. Seeing how easily his classmate transformed, Carrig feels insecure and decides to give up on the transformation, as he is completely disconnected from his animal form. However, with Lisa's help, Carrig manages to remember his past life, walking in the forest with his biological family, and then assumes his true form. The principal then orders everyone to transform, and Carrig realizes that he is in a school full of wolves. At that moment, Lisa states that, at that school, Carrig will learn to live with his human and animal sides, becoming a mediator between the two worlds. Hours later, while resting in his room, the young man receives a visit from Brandon and discovers that he will be his new roommate. Suddenly, Holly appears and says it's time to go to the cafeteria. After getting his food, Carrig meets Dorian, the boy who has the ability to transform into a cat. Before going to Clearwater High, Dorian lived as a pet for a human family and was caught red-handed opening a can of sardines. After demonstrating his animal form, Carrig began to be more respected by his classmates, but he also began to be feared by weaker animals. As a result, some students began to avoid him, as his mere presence represented a great threat. Since his animal form is a small hare, Bo tries to stay out of trouble, but ends up getting into trouble with Jeffrey. Seeing the defenseless boy in danger, Carrig confronts the boy to defend him and ends up getting into trouble. While the wolves try to intimidate the newcomer, James appears and, once again, manages to calm the situation down. That night, while dreaming of his family, Carrig is awakened by Brandon, who transforms in his sleep and accidentally destroys his own bed. According to him, this usually happens once or twice a week, and upon hearing this, Carrig realizes that the next few nights will not be as peaceful as he would like. The next day, during combat class, Berta and Brendan are chosen for a confrontation, but the bison decides to flee before the duel even begins. Despite being an extremely strong animal, Brandon declares himself a pacifist, so Carrig is chosen to take his place. When he realizes that the boy is unsure of his abilities, Andre decides to help him and asks him to inhale the scent of a small bag containing cougar urine. After transforming, the feline invades the battlefield and, despite being much smaller than Berta, establishes his dominance through strength. Next, Leroy and Dorian are invited to face each other, but upon smelling the foul odor emitted by his opponent, the cat flees the fight and hands over the victory on a silver platter. At the end of class, Andrew decides to talk to Carrig and offers to be his mentor. He then hands him the small bag of urine and tells him that he has a promising future. Jealous of seeing the school's sponsor giving Carrig more attention than all the other students, Jeffrey decides to challenge him to a duel against two wolves and says that if the boy wins, they will leave him alone. In the late afternoon, the young man accompanies his new friends to the treehouse and tells them that he will participate in a duel against the wolves. Upon hearing this, Brandon begins to worry about the possibility of his friend being expelled, but Carrig says he is tired of hearing taunts. When she realizes she won't be able to convince him not to participate in the fight, Holly says she will be there to support her friend, and Brandon says he can't wait for those wolves to be defeated. So, that night, the trio sneaks out of the dormitory, and Carrig sniffs the small bag before transforming. Upon arriving at the agreed location, Carrig asks who the wolves are that will face him, and then realizes he has been lured into a trap. Instead of fighting two wolves, the boy is surrounded by Jeffrey and his entire pack, but he still doesn't give up the fight. Despite being stronger than those wolves, Carrig ends up being attacked from behind, and all his opponents join forces to strike him. Seeing her friend in trouble, Holly pushes Brandon off the cliff so that the bison can go to his aid, and while his friend distracts the wolves, Carrig attacks. At that moment, Jeffrey and his pack have no choice but to retreat and accept defeat. The next morning, during class, James notices that some of his students are injured and orders them to go to the infirmary. When asked what caused their injuries, the young people come up with a variety of excuses, but it is not difficult to see that they were injured during a fight. When he is about to be questioned by the principal to tell his version of what happened, Carrig receives an invitation to take a walk with Andrew and, during the ride, discovers that the man already knows what happened the night before. According to the millionaire, a true cougar should not need help to defeat those wolves, even though it was 4 against 1. Since he left his biological family at a very young age, Carrig didn't have time to learn how to hunt, so Andrew decides to teach him, as he wants the boy to become a true predator. After the outing, Andrew takes his pupil back to school and gets scolded by Lissa, who forbids him from giving preferential treatment to any student. The principal then goes to talk to Carrig and tells him that if he wants to stay at that school, he will have to follow the rules like everyone else, so he must never again engage in combat with other students outside of class hours. As soon as Lissa leaves, Holly and Brandon show up to ask what happened, and during the conversation, Carrig spots Lou walking toward the forest. The boy immediately decides to go after her, and they both find a group of teachers talking about the animal attacks that have been happening lately. They believe that the animals did not organize these attacks on their own, which means that shape-shifters are involved in this plan. The problem is that if humanity finds out what is happening, peaceful coexistence between the two species will become impossible. Therefore, Lissa and the other members of the Woodwalker Council need to devise a plan to prevent further attacks. As he walks back to school, Carrig says that when he spent the night in a neighboring town with his mother and sister, he saw 4 wolves attacking humans and comes to the conclusion that they were Jeffrey and his friends. The next day, as agreed, Andrew accompanies Carrig to the forest to teach him his first lesson. According to the man, the more often he transforms, the easier it will be for Carrig to control his 2 forms, and then the boy will be able to bring out the best in himself, both in human and animal form. Before starting the hunt, the cougar needs to define its prey and slowly move away to set up an ambush that will facilitate its success. After capturing the deer, they both share the meal and, hours later, walk back to school. During their conversation, Andrew mentions that he had a daughter who, if she were still alive, would be the same age as Carrig. That day, during recess, Lou notices that his friend has refused lunch and asks if he is not hungry. At that moment, Carrig reveals that he went hunting that morning with Andrew and caught his first prey. Upon hearing this, Lou gets up and leaves, as she remembers the day her mother was attacked by a cougar and has never been able to walk normally since. In an attempt to make amends with his friend, Carrig decides to go after her and follows her into the forest, but is unable to catch up with her. At dusk, while in her room trying to sleep, Carrig hears Jeffrey's howls and, looking out the window, realizes that the wolves are plotting something. In an attempt to find out what the pack is planning to do, the cougar decides to go after them and follows them to the nearest town. Once there, the wolves scare off a security guard to